Welcome, all my beautiful people out there. It's your man Louie T, back for another installment of the Louie T Network podcast. I'm back. I'm rejuvenated. I feel good. Feels good. Feels good to be back behind the mic. We got another division to knock down as we continue to go through each and every single one of these divisions, schedules, and predictions for the upcoming season. Today, we'll do the NFC North. Also, DEEBO Samuel gets paid. He's going to remain in San Francisco. Kyler Murray has the film provision yanked out of his contract. We'll talk a little bit about that. Hopefully, if we have a little bit of time later on in the show. Deshaun Watson finally gets his suspension, and we find out the verdict there. We'll definitely talk about that. And anything else under the sun you guys want to get to here on the Louie T Network podcast starts now. Who else could it be? For me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the 280th installment of the Louie T Network podcast. I, of course, am your set man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Was a beautiful weekend. My wife treated me to a weekend out on the town. Went to DC. It was my first time really experiencing DC in quite some time. I've never experienced DC quite like that. I've been several times, but it was good to actually get out. And I haven't been out a ton since COVID. Locally at least. I've been to Mexico and things of that nature, but not really doing much. Everything we've done when we've gone abroad has usually been indoors by ourselves, isolated and secluded, like in a cabin or something like that. So to be out and about, summertime, it's hot, things can happen. I will say DC is an interesting place, to say the least. It's definitely different. It's my speed, though. It's not something I can't handle, but it's definitely different. First of all, driving up there is the worst. I thought that there were some areas that I've been to where the driving was terrible. There's nothing like DC driving. They're terrible up there. I mean, it's horrible driving up there. We we encountered so many different types of people. One guy, I think he was homeless. I'm not sure. But he was outside. It was late at night. Me and my wife were out front walking around. We had just come back from Harris Teeter. So we stayed at a hotel, the Hilton, and right next to the Hilton was a Harris Teeter's. So you could just walk right down around the corner, and there was a Harris Teeter's right on the corner. And so we were, walking back and forth down the street, and this guy stops us, and he gives us his life story, trying to ask us if we had some weed, right? So he's like, man, I've had a hell of a day. I had a tough conversation with my dad. I haven't spoken to my wife in 4 days, and at my pocket, I had my marijuana in my pocket, and I slipped, and it must have fell out of my pocket, and all I got is $6, and he had his papers, right? He had his papers ready to roll up, but he didn't have anything in it. And he's like, "Oh man, do you guys happen to know where I can get some weed, or do you guys have some weed?" And we're like, "No, bro." And literally, he talked for like 3 minutes nonstop, as fast as a person could humanly talk. And at the end, he just really wanted some weed. That was the gist of his conversation. Very interesting people that you run into in DC. And he was the same guy that earlier in the day was yelling at someone because obviously they had done something to him that he didn't like. And he's like, "We don't do that shit here, okay? That's New York shit. You take that shit back up north. Get out of my city. Get the hell out of my city." So, like I said, it was a very interesting time, and some interesting people, to say the least. But all in all, we had a great time. We walked out of, a party that we hit. And for those of you who follow me on IG, you saw I posted it on my story. We were out and about, and we come outside of the establishment, and I think somebody got stabbed. I'm not sure. There was throw up followed by blood. It could have just been someone threw up, and then they ended up throwing up their guts and literally threw up some blood. But there was caution tape, and it was blocked off, and literally it was right in front of the building. So they literally had to block it off because we almost walked in, some of the bile, throw up in the blood that was there. And then the person that was responsible for the blood was on a stretcher. And again, it's right there. So again, it was crazy, lots of foolishness, but um, it was a great weekend. I would love to do it again. Can't wait to do it again. And looking forward to seeing more of DC and getting down to the harbor and MGM and all of that stuff that I haven't been able to do yet because of COVID. When we moved up this way, we were so excited about all the things that we would be able to get into. And really because of COVID and shit, it's still not that safe now. Monkeypox and all kinds of bullshit going on around now. Still really not all that safe. But, I think as humans, Americans, I should say, we've pretty much said to ourselves, like, okay, whatever's going to happen is going to happen, but we're not going to stop living life. Yeah, that is until somebody dies or, it's some kind of crazy outbreak and they don't actually know what the hell's going on. That's when we'll kind of go back into isolation and we'll have all this quarantining going on and shutdowns. But until something like that happens, if it's just COVID, people are going to just continue to live life. So it was good to get out this weekend. That is for sure. Hopefully your weekend was as good as mine was. I said goodbye to July and I said, I'll see you again next year. God spare life. And now we've turned the calendar to August, and that means it's football time, folks. We will be getting the Hall of Fame game this week. That will be followed by a full slate of preseason action. Hold on. Am I jumping the gun here? Let me get to a schedule real quick. I might be jumping the gun here on the Hall of Fame game. It's usually that first, it used to be Saturday or Sunday. They moved it to Thursday. Let's see. Hall of Fame game 2022. Let's see when this is this year. Thursday, this Thursday. Hall of Fame game, Jags and the Raiders. So once we get that game, and then the subsequent football the following week. So there will be no preseason games this week, but following week we'll start to get those preseason games. It'll start Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you'll get a Monday night telecast, and we'll start to see some of these new broadcast teams or in new spots. Like for instance, Monday Night Football. That's Joe Buck and Troy Aikman now, and they're going to have a Monday night game. I want to say next Monday. Not this coming Monday, but the following Monday, they'll have a Monday night game. I'm thinking like the 15th of August is the first Monday night telecast that we'll get. So you're going to start to see some of these new broadcast teams in action. Bart Scott, can't wait. So everything is starting to ramp up the way that it's supposed to. And we'll get our first taste of football this coming Thursday. And again, it's going to be trash. Right? Don't get excited. Don't get all worked up about it. Literally, you may get one possession of starters. More likely than not, you won't get any starters from either side. All right. And it'll just be a bunch of backups. And but it's just professional tackle football on your television again. And that's usually all that signifies, all that means. And that's a great sight for these eyes. So with that said, we've got a few more divisions actually to get through. We've got the NFC North, which we'll tackle today. We've got the AFC South. We'll tackle that division on the next installment of the Louie T Network podcast. And then we'll finish up our rounds around the league in the NFC South, and that's a division I think if the Saints aren't good, that division could fall on hard times this season. Obviously with sans for the Buccaneers, I think the rest of that division could be god awful if the Saints aren't any good, but that defense is still going to be good. I think they're going to be okay. Jameis Winston comes back and just can play solid football. They should be fine. They put all those weapons out there around him. Hopefully they'll be much improved with the New Orleans Saints this season, but we'll see. That's a division. Again, there are some divisions this year that you think but you don't have any idea. That could be one of them. This could be one of those divisions that we'll talk about today. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and jump into the gym dropping session, which will feature the NFC North and those schedules. Let me drop this gem on your melon. Open your mind, let your conscience be free. You're now rolling with your man, Louie T double E. Let me open you up, get you thinking a little bit. So let's jump into the schedules for the NFC North. We'll start with the team that won the division, that wins this division every single year, and that's the Green Bay Packers. And as long as they have Aaron Rodgers, they'll probably continue to win this division every year. And so let's talk about the Packers and their schedule. This is an intriguing, not necessarily schedule, but it's an intriguing Packers team. No more Devontae Adams. Rodgers signed his extension this offseason, so he's going to be around. He knew what he was getting himself into. He knew Devontae Adams wasn't going to be back when he signed on the dotted line. They brought in a bunch of guys, most of them young. They did bring in Samuel Watkins, but for the most part, this is a young receiving core around Aaron Rodgers. It's Aaron Rodgers, so you think he's just going to take what they give him and, they're going to make the best of the situation and he's going to be absolutely fine. But I don't like making assumptions. I mean, he's getting up there in age. Look, the guy won the last 2 MVPs. What am I saying, right? But still, that was with Devontae Adams. I'm interested to see what Aaron Rodgers at, damn near 40 is going to do with a bunch of new guys. Essentially what, there's 1 or 2 holdovers from, Alan Lazard and, a couple of guys. I think Randall Cobb is still on the roster, but, this is a new group of receivers. I want to see what this looks like in Green Bay, but it's still Aaron Rodgers. So you'd like to think that they're going to figure it out, a way to get it done. So that said, let's run through this thing and then I'll come back and give you the pocket of the schedule that I think is important for the Green Bay Packers. So week 1 at Minnesota, week 2 home for Chicago. That's on a Sunday night. We seem to get Packers Bears on some kind of primetime outlet. Usually it's Sunday Night Football. Seems like every year. And the game never is any good. It's usually Green Bay winning comfortably. The Bears usually fight for about a quarter or two. They fought like hell for the first half of the game last year, and then the Packers ran away and prevailed late. Anyway, at Tampa Bay week 3. That should be a fun one there. Home for the New England Patriots in week 4. At the Giants, which is technically not a road game because it's in London. They come back home in week 6 versus the Jets, then hit the road for 3 straight at Washington in week 7, at Buffalo in week 8. That's a Sunday night contest. That should be delectable. Week 9, they're at Detroit before finally hitting home again, this time against the Dallas Cowboys. Week 11, they're home for the Tennessee Titans. That's a Thursday night football contest. The following week, they're at Philadelphia. That's a Sunday night football contest. Week 13, they're at Chicago. That is a road game against the Bears before hitting their week 14 bye. They come off the bye and they go through a stretch where they played 3 out of their final 4 at home, which you would have expected with all those road games that we've talked about. Home for the Rams off the bye on a Monday night. So not only do they get the bye week before they host the Super Bowl defending champions, they also get the benefit of an additional day to prepare as they play them on a Monday night. So that'll be a big game. You think late season, 2 of the better teams in the conference squaring off. That should mean something. We'll see if both teams hold up their end of the bargain by the time we get to week 15 on a Monday night. At Miami for their final road game of the regular season. And then weeks 17 and 18 against 2 divisional opponents. Week 17 home for Minnesota. Week 18 finishing up the season home for the Detroit Lions. The pocket of the schedule that I think means a lot because I really feel like I think a lot of people are intrigued. I think the prevailing thought is it's Aaron Rodgers. They'll figure it out. He always figures it out. Right. But it could be different. We still don't know if they have a true number 1 wide receiver. One thing Rodgers has usually had throughout his career, unlike Brady, who's made, a lot of lemonade with lemons at receiver at times throughout his career, especially in New England, is Rodgers has usually had a number 1 guy he could throw the football to, whether it was Greg Jennings or Devontae Adams. There's usually been, or Jordy Nelson, there's always been some type of a number 1 wide receiver, a guy that we all viewed as a number 1 that could carry the load, and then you fill in the gaps with other receivers. I don't know if that guy exists on that roster right now. It could be Christian Watson for all we know. It could be nobody, and Rodgers has to spread it around judiciously amongst 5 or 6 different guys. Who's to say? But it'll be interesting to see what he does. I think it's important that they get off to a fast start. I think if they find themselves in a dogfight with, say, Minnesota this year for the division crown, and they get off to a rough start and Minnesota gets off to a fast start, who's to say that they can dig themselves out of that hole? One thing the Packers have been great at over the years, especially since Matt LaFleur has come on board, but they've been really good at this throughout Rodgers' career, is being front runners. They're great at building, starting off the season 7-2, 8-1, cruising to a 13-3 mark, 12-4. Nobody else in the division is even close. They wrap up the division with 2-3 weeks left in the season. Got to decide whether they want to play Rodgers or not down the stretch because they don't need to, that sort of thing. It's backfired in years, previous years, because they get to the playoffs, haven't played in 2 weeks. They get beat by the first team they see, like they did last year against San Francisco. Other years they've made it to the championship game, but haven't been able to get over the hump. We'll see what happens with them, but I think it is imperative that they get off to a fast start. And to me, the toughest part of their schedule is at the beginning of their schedule. To me, the first 9 weeks of the season are tough. They play every single one of the teams in their division once. 2 of those 3 games are on the road. Speaking of on the road, 6 of their first 9 contests of the season are on the road. So they're getting a lot of road action early in the season. And it'll be interesting to see how they navigate all of these road games early in the season. So week 1 at Minnesota, I think that's a huge game within the division. Minnesota's been one of the few teams in the division that has given Green Bay problems over the years. And so whether it's in Minnesota or at Green Bay, the Vikings have never been shy of taking down Aaron Rodgers. The year that he got injured, that came at the hands of the Minnesota Vikings. So this is a big game because the Vikings are out to make a statement. New head coach, new GM, new situation. They feel like they've got a breath of fresh air in Miami or Minnesota after moving on from Mike Zimmer. And we're going to see what the Vikings are all about. And they got to go on the road to Minnesota week 1. And that's going to be a fun game there. Then you come home for Chicago, Sunday Night Football. I expect them to take care of business there. But then right after that, you're back on the road against Tampa Bay, a team that just 2 years ago, Super Bowl champions, right? So that's a tough one on the road. Brady versus, Rodgers. Is that the final time we get Brady versus Rodgers? Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. But that's a big one on the road. The following week after that, you got the Patriots at the crib. I don't know what Patriots team is going to show up. I still think their offense is going to stink without their longtime offensive coordinator, Josh McDaniels. But we'll see if the Brady, one thing about Belichick, the offense may stink, but the defense is going to be up to, par. And so they may give Aaron Rodgers fits in that game and give themselves a chance. You're at the Giants, but it's really a neutral site game. It's in London. You should take care of business there. You come back, you got the Jets at the crib. You probably should take care of business there. But then you got 3 straight road games. At Washington, the place Aaron Rodgers has never won in the regular season. At Buffalo, that's as tough an environment to go and win a football game as there is in the NFL, especially when the Bills are playing the type of football that we know they're capable of playing. That's on a Sunday night, so the crowd is going to be amped. Even though the Bills have been really good the last couple of years, there still hasn't been a ton of primetime games for them, for their fan base to really get juiced and ginned up about. The one game they had last year against New England, in Orchard Park, it was raining sideways. It was windy, like 30-mile-an-hour wind gusts. It wasn't the type of game that they should be able to celebrate in Buffalo. This is going to be earlier in the season. Probably weather's going to be a little bit better. It's going to be a raucous crowd. That's going to be a fun one there. And then at Detroit, still family business. We think the Lions are going to be improved this year. That's a good little stretch of football, those first 9 weeks. But again, 6 of those 9 games are on the road. And you've got some really good opponents in here in Tampa Bay, New England, Buffalo. Those are all teams that were playoff, opponents from a season ago. And we think that Minnesota's going to be improved this year. Washington could be improved this year. The Lions could be improved this year. So this is going to be an interesting start to the season. If it's the Packers of old, the Packers that have dominated, that, is, out, head and shoulders above the rest of the division. If that team shows up, then they'll run through these first 9 games and they'll be 7-2, 8-1, hell, even 9-0. I don't see them running the table here, but they'll be no worse than 7-2, 6-3 bare minimum, right? If they're struggling, if this is not the same cast of characters, if Aaron Rodgers can't carry the load, if the defense isn't holding up their end of the bargain, whatever the case may be, maybe it's a confluence of all of those things, and they're 5-4 or worse, then maybe this isn't the year that the Packers run away with this thing. Maybe they got to fight for it. Maybe they win this division at 10-7. Maybe they don't win the division at all. I think they're going to come out of this 6-3. I'm somewhat worried. 5-4 is when I really start to say, all right, do I need to press and sound with this Packers football team? They should be no worse than 7-2 through this stretch, more likely than not. I mean, maybe 6-3. I could see that again. Tampa, at Washington, at Buffalo. Those are all at Minnesota. You could pick 3 out of 4 of those they could lose on the road, right? I think they should be able to win the rest of those games, but you never know what happens at Detroit, But the home games, even New England at the crib, I think is one they should be able to handle, but you just never know. So 6-3. I'll cut them a break because, like I said, it's a tough slate because of how many road games are in there. So I'll say that 6-3 is the I'll be okay with them coming out of that stretch 6-3. So I got the Packers going 12-5. I just believe in Aaron Rodgers. The regular season Aaron Rodgers is the reason why he's been the MVP the last 2 years. I get it. No Devontae Adams. I'm anxious to see, just like the rest of you, what that looks like and how he's able to maneuver around the fact that he's got his star wide receiver no longer in Green Bay. But it's Aaron freaking Rodgers. I just figure he'll turn one of these dudes into a household name, and they'll just keep the party going in Green Bay. If they can run it, he can go play action fake. Christian Watson will take over the MVS role as the field stretcher, the vertical threat, and they'll fill in the gaps, whether it's Samuel Watkins or Alan Lazard or one of these other young guys, Romeo Dobbs, somebody will step up, and they'll be just fine at receiver. They'll figure it out. I got them going 12-5. Minnesota. Let's switch gears to the Minnesota Vikings and take a look at their schedule and see what they're up to this year. And we'll run through the schedule. Then I'll give you the stretch of games that I think are important. So home for Green Bay week 1. We talked about that already. At Philadelphia in week 2 on a Monday night. So this is an interesting dynamic. The NFL is trying something different this year. They're going to have a doubleheader in week 2, but they're going to be on 2 different networks. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, there'll be a game that starts at around 7 o'clock. And then this Eagles-Vikings game will start at like 8:30, right? So you'll have 2 games on simultaneously on Monday on 2 different networks. So you're going to have to, I'm fine. I usually have 2, monitors in front of me watching the games. But for those of you, you'll be flipping back and forth trying to keep up with both of these games. It's an interesting dynamic. But I think it's in a effort to not have those games go off at 2 o'clock in the morning like they would when they would have these double headers stacked and staggered on one after the other. Anyway, week 3 home for Detroit, week 4 at New Orleans, but it's not really a road game. It's a neutral site game over across the pond in London. Home for the Chicago Bears in week 5, at Miami in week 6 before their week 7 bye. They come off the week 7 bye. Week 8 home for Arizona. Week 9 at Washington. Week 10 at Buffalo. Week 11 home for Dallas. Week 12 home for New England. That is a Thanksgiving night showdown. Home for the Jets in week 13. At the Lions in week 14. Home for Indianapolis in week 15. Home for the Giants in week 16. And they finish up the season with 2 road games within the division, at Green Bay week 17 and at Chicago week 18. So this is a very doable schedule, first and foremost. You got a first year head coach in Kevin O'Connell. Could he have the same success that we saw Kevin Stefanski have in Cleveland in his first season? Absolutely, he could. The difference here is the Browns were really good defensively. They had a dominant run game, and I felt like, took advantage of the opportunities that were presented to them. I'm not sure if Minnesota's ready to do that. I don't trust their defense. I don't trust the Vikings defensively. We'll see. Danielle Hunter has to stay healthy. He hasn't done that in 2 years. So I don't really know what to expect. This is one of those teams this season where I could tell you I don't really know what to expect from the Minnesota Vikings, other than I know they can score the football. That I do know that. They have the weapons. They're getting Irv Smith Jr. back this year. He looked like he was ready to tear shit up last year before the injury. So I expect him to come back healthy. And, it sucks that now everyone's going to have to learn a new offensive scheme. So all of the guys that were comfortable in what they were doing previously kind of got to tear that up, start anew. But with all the weapons that they have out there, with some of the guys that emerged last year, I think that offense is explosive. One of the more explosive offenses in football. I just don't trust their defense. So the pocket of the schedule that I think is one that I'll be looking at is right after the bye week. There are 6 games in here for this Vikings football team, because you look at the start to the season, and I think that's very maneuverable, right? They can get around that portion of the schedule, get off to a fairly good start. I mean, it's not easy against Green Bay, home or away, right? That's family business. At Philadelphia on a Monday night, that's not going to be easy, but it's doable. You got Detroit, again, family business, and the Lions have played really well against these Vikings. At New Orleans, but that's in London. We'll see what happens there. Chicago and Miami, home for Chicago, away at Miami. That's your first 6 games of the season prior to the bye. Let's say that you come out of that stretch 3-3, okay? Maybe 4-2, all right? But you're treading water. You're fine. These next 6 games after the bye week, to me, are going to determine, because you could start the season off 4-2. I don't see you being any better than 4-2. I don't see you getting off to a 5-1 or 6-0 start. 4-2 is the best you can do. Let's say you get off to a 4-2 start even. All right. You come out of the bye week, you're feeling good about yourself. Now you got 6 games, 4 of which are at home. You need to take advantage of this stretch of football, right? Because if you don't, I think you get to the back end of your season and there's still winnable games there, but you're going to put yourself in a position where now you got to go on the road 3 out of the final 5 games, and you got to win, including at Green Bay. Now, at Chicago isn't the worst, but Kirk Cousins has had his fair share of failures on the road at Chicago to finish up the season. Who knows, what the Bears will be playing for then? Probably nothing. And, who knows what you'll be playing for then. But at Detroit, all 3 of your divisional games left in the season are all on the road the last 5 weeks of the season. So that's just tough. I don't care how you view the teams in your division. Going on the road and having to win against teams in your division is always tough. Not to mention Indianapolis is in there at home and the Giants are in there at home. We don't know what the Giants are going to be with a brand new staff. So to me, this pocket of the schedule here after the bye week, home for Arizona, at Washington, at Buffalo, home for Dallas, home for New England, and home for the Jets is a big time. And that, again, that home game against New England, Thanksgiving night, that's a big stretch of football, because you got to find a way to win, I think, at bare minimum 4 out of these 6 games. If you're 4-2, it probably gives you a little bit of breathing room to where you can go 3-3 in that stretch and be 7-5 after that stretch of football, going into your final 5 on the season, and you might be okay. But if you're 3-3 to start out the season, you probably got to win 4 out of 6 of these to get you back over 500 and have a chance down the stretch to make the postseason with those final 5 games. If you're 3-3 and you come out of the next stretch of games at 3-3, now you're 6-6 and you're fighting for your playoff lives. You know what I'm saying? And I don't trust, as much as I love Kirk Cousins, I don't trust Kirk Cousins down the stretch to lead my team to the playoffs in games that I gotta have. Especially with a defense that I don't think is going to hold up their end of the bargain right now. They got to prove it to me. I don't trust the Vikings defensively. So I think that stretch of games is ultimately going to determine what this Vikings season looks like. You're 3-3. You come out of that stretch, you lose 4 out of 6 instead of winning 4 out of 6, and now all of a sudden, you're 5-9. Your season's cooked. You're 5-7. Excuse me. Your season's cooked at 5-7, trying to dig yourself up out of a hole. So I think that's a big stretch of football there. I like the Vikings this year. I don't love the Vikings this year with the new head coach and a defense that I just think is very spotty at best right now. You tell me that we're going to get a healthy Danielle Hunter and that back end is going to be able to hold up. And I tell you, okay, I feel a little bit differently about the Vikings defensively, but you can't assure me of any of that. And because of that, I got them at 9-8 this season. We move on to the next team, and that's the Chicago Bears. And this is a team that I just feel like they failed to pass the eyeball test this offseason. They failed to make enough moves. They moved on from their GM, Ryan Pace. They moved on from their head coach, Matt Nagy. They brought in, a whole gang of new guys. Matt Eberflus is the new head coach. And I'm just floored at the lack of weapons that they've surrounded Justin Fields with. It's pure negligence on their part, if you ask me, what they've done to that young fella. Now, they did go out and sign a few guys. They just traded for N'Keal Harry. He's going to get a fresh start in Chicago. That's great. I'm rooting for him. I don't know, man. I don't think they've done enough, but we'll see. Defensively, they traded Khalil Mack. I just feel like they're punting on this season. No one ever says that they're punting on a season, but when you get a new GM and a new head coach and they see things differently, you want to turn the roster over, you want to get your guys in there. I kind of feel like that's what they're in the process of doing. And it just doesn't seem like Chicago's in a position to win right now. It's tough on a young quarterback when you're put in a position. I hate when teams draft a young quarterback when a coach is in a lame duck season, where if that coach doesn't win that next year, he's going to get fired. You're putting that young quarterback in the unenviable position of having to really be the bridge that ties together two different regimes, none of which he asked for. So now you're getting one set of coaching, one coaching staff with a set of offensive philosophies. Now you're getting a whole new coaching staff and a brain trust that's coming in, another new staff coaching you from an offensive standpoint. You don't know if these guys love you or not. They didn't draft you, right? So you don't know if these guys believe in you. They can tell you they do, but truth be told, the leash gets a lot shorter when a new regime comes in and they don't know about you. So it's a tough situation for Justin Fields to be in. I really feel for him. Let's go through the schedule real quick, and then I'll give you the games that I've circled for them. Home for San Francisco week 1, at Green Bay on a Sunday night in week 2, home for Houston week 3, at the Giants week 4, at Minnesota week 5, home for Washington week 6. That's a Thursday night football contest. At New England the following week on a Monday night. So back-to-back primetime television games for the Bears. They don't play again on national television after that, thank God. At Dallas in week 8, home for Miami week 9, home for Detroit week 10, at Atlanta week 11, at the Jets week 12, home for Green Bay week 13 before a week 14 bye. They come off the bye, home for Philadelphia, home for Buffalo in week 16, at Detroit week 17, home for Minnesota in week 18. So when you're a young team, you got a new coach, new GM, it's all brand new. It is, and you haven't won in several years. I think it is imperative that you get off to a fast start, because confidence is everything for a young team that hasn't seen success. So you can't afford to start the season off 3-7 and think you're going to run off 5 straight and get over 500 and be battling for a playoff spot. That's not what usually happens with young teams. So, and a first-year head coach in Matt Eberflus. So, or Eberflus. So, in my mind, if Chicago wants to build enough confidence, because honestly, the back end of this schedule is very favorable for the Bears. I mean, if they can find, It kind of is, but it isn't. The Lions are the ones with the very favorable back end of the schedule, but this is not a tough schedule by any stretch of the imagination for the Bears. Like, if they can find a way to win some games early, they can be in the mix. They probably won't make the playoffs, but they can be in the mix late in the season, still playing meaningful football instead of in November already talking about the draft. But if they get off to a slow start, if they're 1-5 after the first 6 weeks, then we already know what this is, right? So I've circled the first 8 games on the schedule, because if you're 2-6 after the first 8 games, it's over. If you're 1-7, it's been over. 0-8, of course, you're one of the worst teams in football. You're 3-5. Okay, it's not quite ideal, but you're not dead in the water, right? 2-game win streak, after the first 8. You got home for Miami, home for Detroit. You win those 2 games, you're back to 500, right? Even if you get off to a 3-5 start. But it's imperative that they get off to some semblance of a solid start to give them just a bit of confidence. So at home for San Francisco, that's tough. I mean, it's home game. You don't know what Trey Lance is going to be. Maybe you can rattle the young fella's cage a bit, force him into a couple of mistakes, and maybe you can eke one out in week 1, and that would give you some confidence going into week 2 at Green Bay. You're not going to win that game more likely than not. But you're home for Houston in week 3. I mean, you can win your first 2 out of 3, probably won't, but hey, at least you got a shot, right? At the Giants, come on, you can do this, Chicago, right? At Minnesota, I'm just saying it. The Vikings should take you down in that game, right? But that's family business. Who knows what the hell's going to happen there? Home for Washington, again, another game that you're probably looking at and saying, why can't we win this football game? That's on a Thursday night. It's a quick turnaround. At New England on a Monday night, that's going to be tough. I expect Belichick to craft up a game plan to really confuse the young fella, make him make some mistakes. At Dallas, that's not going to be easy by any stretch, but I just gave you your first 8 games of the season. Why can't you beat San Francisco? Why can't you beat Houston? Why can't you beat the Giants? Why can't you beat Washington? Why can't you beat Minnesota? That's what you got to be saying to yourself. You're probably not going to beat Green Bay on the road. Probably not going to beat New England on the road. Probably not going to beat Dallas on the road. But why can't you beat Washington at home on a Thursday night? Why can't you beat the Giants in the Meadowlands? Why can't you beat Houston at home? Why can't you beat San Francisco week 1, who's starting a second-year quarterback, but for all intents and purposes, he's a rookie as a starter? Why not? That's what you got to be telling yourself. Now, I don't like your odds, right? But that's what you got to be telling yourself if you're a Chicago Bears fan. And if you're a player, we got to get off to a fast start. I don't think they will. I don't think they will. I don't love their offense. I do know this. Matt Eberflus is a hell of a defensive mind. He'll have that defense playing ball, and if you don't score enough points and you let them hang around, they might jump up and bite you. But I think they got a ways to go. I think what Eberflus has come in and effectively done is he's looking to fortify the defensive side of the football. They've drafted safeties and corners and things of that nature to put themselves in a better position to compete right away defensively, because I think they know that they're lacking offensively. And so they want to keep the score down, give the offense a chance to come around. That sounds good in theory. I don't buy it. 5-12 for the Chicago Bears this year. I just think they don't have enough firepower offensively to get it done. And ultimately, I think that's where they're going to lose a lot of ball games this season. We're going to finish this thing up with the Detroit Lions schedule. They're going to be on Hard Knocks this year. Remember that. They should be, if nothing else, it should be interesting just listening to Dan Campbell. He should be a walking soundbite during Hard Knocks. But anyway, run through the schedule real quick, then we'll come back and I'll tell you, the pocket of the schedule that I've highlighted. Home for Philadelphia week 1, home for Washington week 2, at Minnesota week 3, home for Seattle week 4, at New England week 5. You got a week 6 bye. You come off the bye at Dallas week 7, home for Miami week 8, home for Green Bay week 9, at Chicago week 10. At the Giants week 11, home for Buffalo. That is a Thanksgiving Day game. Home for Jacksonville in week 13, home for Minnesota week 14, at the Jets week 15, at Carolina week 16, home for Chicago week 17, at Green Bay week 18. So this is a very doable schedule if you're Detroit. And honestly, you just got to get to the back end of this thing. Really, if you can find a way to navigate, I highlighted the first 10 weeks, but truth be told, if you can just get through the first 9 weeks of this puppy, the back end is set up for you to go on a run if you're playing with any bit of confidence. It's set up for you to start knocking teams down left and right and winning games and giving yourself a chance to compete for a playoff spot if you started out the season with any kind of success. So the first 10 weeks of the season feature 9 games. There's a week 6 bye in there. And it looks like this: home for Philadelphia, home for Washington. Okay. If you're the Lions, you'd like to win both of those games, but you're just asking for a split there. You really don't care which one of those NFC East teams you beat at home. You don't want to drop your first 2 of the season. They're giving you an opportunity at the crib to get off to a start. You determine what start that is. Is it a slow start or is it the fast start? Or are you kind of in the middle? If they're giving you 2 home games, you can't afford to lose both of them. You've got to win one of those games if you're Detroit. And then you're at Minnesota in week 3, and then you get Seattle at the crib. I mean, just think about if you beat Philadelphia and Washington in weeks 1 and 2, say you go to Minnesota and you lose week 3, but you get Seattle, who we think is going to stink this year, at the crib in week 4, you're in a great spot to start 3-4, right? I mean, 3 out of your first 4, 3-1, right? More likely than not, that's a 2-2 start for you if you're able to split, the 2 home games at the beginning of the season. But if you're not careful, you drop both of those, you could be 1-3 in that stretch. And that's what I'm saying is they got to figure out a way to navigate this schedule. It's not an impossible start, right? Then you get New England in week 5. That's on the road prior to your bye week. So if you're Detroit, you're breaking this thing up into segments. I think the first 5 weeks prior to the bye, you really are telling yourself, hey, we just need to get to that bye week at 3-2. Find a way to split the first 2, if not win both of those, split the first 2, try to find a way to beat Minnesota in Minnesota, got to win against Seattle. And then if we got to go to New England and win, go to New England and win. But, no worse than 2-3, but it'd be great if we can come out of that stretch 3-2. All right. Come off the bye at Dallas. Okay. That's tough, but it's not impossible. Home for Miami. That's not going to be easy, but it's not impossible. Again, home for Green Bay. Okay. And then at Chicago. Those are your first 10 games. If you can, or first 9 games, first 10 weeks. You can come out of that thing 4-5. Listen to this back end of the schedule. Okay. Just think about it. Just think about if the Lions are 4-5 after that stretch of football. Okay. Even let's say that they start out 1-3 or they start out 2-3. Okay. Let's say they start 2-3, come off the bye, and they win, 2. They split that, those 4 games after the bye, and they're 2-2 after 10 weeks of football. And so now they're on the season total, they're 4-5, right? Let's say they lose to Dallas, that drops them to 2-4 in the season. They beat Miami, that brings them to 3-4. They lose to Green Bay, that drops them to 3-5, and then they beat Chicago on the road, and they're 4-5, right? Listen to this schedule down the stretch as a 4-5 team going in to the final 8 games of your schedule. Listen to this: at the Giants, home for Buffalo on Thanksgiving, home for Jacksonville, home for Minnesota, at the Jets, at Carolina, home for Chicago, at Green Bay. Of those 8 games, only 2 of them stand out as, man, that seems like a kamikaze mission. And who knows what Green Bay is going to be playing for in week 18, right? If there's nothing on the line, just like last year when they played Green Bay in week 18 and there was nothing in the line, the Lions won that game because the Packers had nothing to play for. Buffalo on Thanksgiving seems like a pretty tough, daunting task, right? It's still at home, but nobody respects the Lions on Thanksgiving, right? So Buffalo will probably come in there and totally wreck them on Thanksgiving Day. Green Bay in week 18 is another one of those ones that doesn't look all that appealing if you're a Lions fan. But at the Giants, home for Jacksonville, home for Minnesota, at the Jets, at Carolina, home for Chicago. Are you kidding me? Seriously? I'm not saying they'll be favored in all 6 of those games because they won't, but they'll have a chance to be favored in 3 or 4 of those games. The Lions are interesting. I don't believe in Jared Goff. I don't believe that they're going to take a massive step forward, but I do think they're going to take a step forward. He's not the quarterback of the future in Detroit. I think they've, positioned themselves, um, building the roster to put themselves in a position to get that guy eventually. I don't know if they'll get that guy next year, but I think they do see an improvement. I got the Lions at 7-10 this season. That's a big improvement from one of the worst teams in football a season ago at 3-14 or whatever they were. So I think they're a 7-win team this year. I can see them doing that. They were in so many close ball games last year. I just see them finding a way to win some games that they lost in heartbreaking fashion last season. So that is the NFC North. Green Bay comes in first, Minnesota in second, Lions in third, and the Bears bring up the rear. So you guys tell me what you think about this division as we will transition to social media maneuvers. I'm a midday marauder. You know what it is. Let's get to the comment section. I think I have 2 super chats. I think I saw 2 supers. We'll get to any comments out there that have the hashtag LouieTLive. We'll get to as many of those as we can. Obviously, we cannot get to all of them, but we'll get to as many of them as we can. And then we will get to the final segment of the show and start talking about some of the things that happened over the weekend and some of the things that happened prior to the weekend. Let's get to the first super chat from my guy, Nick Riley, a.k.a. Nick at Night. My guy, Nick, has been tripping lately, man. Love Nick to death, but I think he's drinking a little bit too much of that purple Kool-Aid. Needs to put the cup down. He was drunk the other day talking all kinds of recklessness. So I'm dying to see what this comment says. My guy, Nick, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, you already know whose division this is. He says, hashtag skull. Also, my birthday is on the 7th, bro. Getting too old. You know what? Never, ever apologize for getting old. And don't be upset at getting old. Getting old isn't fun, but it's a blessing, right? And so I've learned to really cherish the fact that I'm able to joke about getting old. But yes, as each year passes, you get older and you learn very quickly that you can't do some of the things you used to be able to do as you get older and older. So that shit is real. Getting old is real. Okay. That's definitely a real thing. And he says, you already know whose division it is. You're right. I do. It's the Green Bay Packers division. It's always the Packers division. He says, or Twin D, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Twin D, writes, LT, I'm 4 minutes late and hear you talking about my town, New York. How about a gentleman's bet? A glass of wine for whenever we're in the same place at the same time. Mets to hold off Atlanta for first place. Oh, I definitely take that bet. We're coming for what's rightfully ours. We actually have you guys a bunch of times in the next week and a half. I think we play you a grand total of 9 times, I think, over the next 2 weeks or so. I know we have a 5-game series with you, which features a doubleheader. And I think we got another either 3 or 4 game set. It's either 8 games in the span of 2 weeks, or it's 9 games in the span of 2 weeks. But it's a lot. We're gonna figure out some shit in that span. And you just got Jacob deGrom back. That's a big boost to your rotation. I'm not scared. Okay. And this is the thing. We've got championship pedigree. You don't. So I'll take that bet. Take that gentleman's bet all day long, all day strong. All right. I expect my Braves to show up when it matters most. Now we're in the dog days of summer into August. This is when the real teams show up. I expect one move to be made here at the trade deadline. It's already come and gone. I think today was the trade deadline at 4 p.m. I don't recall us doing anything, but usually my GM is pretty damn shrewd during this time. We'll see what happens, but I'm betting on my guys, and apparently you're betting on your guys, and that's totally fine, but I'm going to take my guys, okay? Because they've shown the ability to get the shit done. So I'm rolling with my guys, Twin D. But anyway, I digress. Thank you for that super chat. I got a super chat here. This one is from Red Wings 01. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Red Wings 01 writes, Moment of silence for Mr. Bill Russell. When I learned he died, that was one of those, oh wow. I had to sit down moments. My wife told me, she said, "Oh no, Bill Russell died." I'm like, "Stop playing. Don't play with me like that." She's like, "No, he died, 88." I had to sit down and catch myself for a second because he's one of those, he's like a one of those dudes that in every aspect of life, he was a winner. And, some guys ran away from the activist role. Sometimes you don't ask to be put in positions of power, but sometimes because of what you were blessed with, you find yourself in a position of power. And some guys relish that. Some guys take that role head on, like Bill Russell did, and others don't want any parts of it, like a Michael Jordan or a Tiger Woods. They don't want any parts of that, you know? And that's okay too. Charles Barkley once famously said, "I'm not your kid's role model," right? I didn't ask to be your kid's role model. I'm not your role model. Okay. So don't look at me as one. That's not what I'm here to be. I'm here to play basketball. So not everybody's looking to be an advocate for groups that are marginalized in this country. But Bill Russell, at a time when it wasn't popular for a guy like him, even though he was in a really good position as an NBA player, he still was a black man in America in the 1950s and 60s. Yet he knew it was his job, and there were others like him, Jim Brown and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was then Lou Alcindor. A lot of those guys understood the assignment, right? And he championed so many different things, civil rights, all of the things that the luxuries and freedoms that we have today. He fought for so many of them. He was a pioneer then on the court. Guy, I saw these numbers the other day. Guy averaged 22 and a half rebounds a game. Are you kidding me? 22 and a half rebounds? Seriously? I get it. Back in those days, they probably didn't have the same, not probably, they didn't have the same caliber of athletes. 22 rebounds is 22 rebounds is 22 rebounds. It's a lot of damn rebounds per game, right? But we know about all the championships he won. No one won more than Bill Russell in American sports. We understand all of that. But I don't think anybody won off the court more than Bill Russell. I don't know if there's anyone in any walk of life that didn't respect Bill Russell and what he stood for. If you were a decent human being, he touched so many, he impacted so many different avenues and so many things that we look at and probably take for granted today. He impacted those things. And he was a gentle soul too. You could tell, the smile. First of all, he had one of the biggest smiles you'd ever see in your life. And everyone, it was funny. One of his favorite things to do was flip the bird. I remember Charles Barkley was talking about him during a ceremony, and he flipped him the bird, right? I remember he got an award. I think it was a Lifetime Achievement Award. He walks up to the stage, and all of these centers are on the stage, and he told every single one of them, you, and you, I kick all of your asses, right? Vince Carter stood up one time, and he was yelling to Bill Russell, "Hey, Bill, how you doing?" And Bill flips him off, like that was his move, right? Like he was just a cool dude, man. There was so many different layers to Bill Russell, but the thing that I will always remember, I won't tell my kids about Bill Russell, the basketball player. I'll tell them about Bill Russell, the activist, because if it wasn't for guys like him and the things that he did when it was tough to do it, we don't enjoy some of the civil liberties that we have today and that we're still fighting for today, but that we have today. So rest in paradise, rest in power, Mr. Bill Russell. Lived a long, illustrious, beautiful life. And I'm glad I got to see him live and enjoy a lot of the fruits of his labor. So rest in power, Bill Russell. Let's see. I got another super chat here. This one is from the Phillies Ace 34. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. The Phillies Ace 34 writes, Louie, I know you think I may be crazy, but if everything falls right, like in 17, especially without Wentz, we're not favored to even win with Foles. Without Wentz, we're not favored to even win with Foles. Excuse me. It's hard to say what would have happened then. It's hard to say what's going to happen this year. I told you, right now, I'm in the season of, all right, we've gotten to this point now. Enough talking. We're in the training camp. We can sit here and argue back and forth on what could or couldn't happen, what should or shouldn't happen, what did or didn't happen. I'm ready to see what's about to happen. I'm done arguing with most Eagles fans. I'll have, simple conversations, but the yelling back and forth about Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts. Okay, the season's about to start. We'll see. At this point, that's where I'm at with mine, because we're getting so close to where none of the talking matters. Only action on the field matters. But, it's hard to say what would have happened had Wentz stayed healthy. It's hard to say, what would happen this year. If everything falls into place for the Eagles. Defensively, they look like they're great on paper. Offensively, they've got weapons. We'll see what happens. Obviously, there's so many different things that can happen throughout the course of an NFL season. So nothing's a guarantee, but it'll be interesting. I don't think you're crazy. I don't think that's crazy, but, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Time will tell. Thank you for the super chat. The Phillies Ace 34 once again. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, Mets and Braves better watch out for my Phillies. I don't really think either one of those teams is that concerned with your Phillies. You have another series with my Braves this week. I'm not sure if it starts tonight or tomorrow. I think it starts tonight. I think it's a 3-game set, which leads us right into the Phillies, the Mets series. But I don't think any one of those two teams are concerned with your Phillies. It's tough for a team who makes a managerial change in season to win a division. If you do that, I'd have to tip more than just my cap to you. But I just don't see the Phillies being that team at all whatsoever. B-Ball God, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. B-Ball God writes, we should try Sip's big ass in Buffalo nickel. What's the difference between Buffalo nickel and slot corner? The biggest difference between the two is the aggressive nature. Like the Buffalo nickel is like a third linebacker, right? He's more aggressive in the run game. I don't think you're looking for him, that Buffalo nickel, to be, covering wide receivers man to man. Like you're really putting him in a tough spot. You're not asking Landon Collins to be covering, Devontae Adams in the slot. That's not a smart decision, right? You want a corner over Devontae Adams. That's the difference between a Buffalo nickel and a slot corner. A slot corner is a guy that can cover receivers. Sure, if he's a physical guy, he can cover receivers and be, physical in the run game. And there are corners in this league that, are able to do both. One of my favorite players in the league, especially defensively to watch, is the Colts nickel corner, Kenny Moore. Love him to death. Love me some Kenny Moore. He's physical. He tackles. He's a playmaker, forces turnovers, gets his hands on footballs. He does everything. I love guys like him. That's why I was so big on the Steelers nickel corner that the Bengals signed in free agency last offseason, that I wanted Washington to sign. He made such a huge difference for their defense. Those kinds of guys are rare to find, though. They're hard to find. Just playmakers inside, guys that you can blitz with, which is why I was such a big Jalen Petrie fan, because I just feel like he's another one of those, even though he's not a corner, he's really a safety. He's got some cover ability, but he would have fit that Buffalo nickel role really well because of his aggressive nature to come down and tackle, but also can cover and give you enough coverage there that you don't feel like you're losing that much. He's just a playmaker. down and around the box. A nickel is more of a slot, is more of a corner, more of a traditional guy that plays opposite of a wide receiver, whereas a Buffalo nickel is more of like a third linebacker type, more of a hybrid, okay, because he should be able to cover just a bit more, but he's more of a presence in the run game, and he can cover if need be, but that's not his forte, right? He's a more athletically gifted linebacker that you're putting on the field, essentially. So, in all intents and purposes, a safety that you're putting on the field, a third safety. Instead of putting a third linebacker, you're subbing out that linebacker. You're trading size, okay, and physicality for more speed, just in case they try to sneak a tight end or somebody else, flex another guy out. Now you've got more speed on the field, and there's not a huge mismatch with a tight end that's athletically gifted that can run. Or if they take a running back and motion him out, that Buffalo nickel should be able to run with that running back out of the backfield, and it's not a mismatch. Whereas if that's just, think about it this way. If that's just, what's his name? Oh, shucks. John Bostic. If that's just John Bostic on the field, you feel like any tight end, any running back should be able to get open against him. God forbid it's a receiver. But if it's a safety, if it's a free safety that's playing at like Percy Butler, you're like, hey, he should be able to run with any running back, any tight end. And if we have to have him cover a tight end out in space or even a receiver, we feel like he can do that too. So that's the difference between the two. I don't know if Sips is going to get an opportunity or not. I think I don't know if they overload him. I think they're just going to leave him at corner right now, but you never know. I didn't think they would try Juice at nickel, and they've been playing him at nickel some, so you never know. Red Wings 01, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Red Wings 01 writes, I saw a poll today that averaged out the 40 times for every team's top 3 wide receivers to see which team had the fastest trio. We came in at number 1 at 4.36. Like I said, we have a fast offense. We went from one of the slower offenses in the league 3 years ago to now one of the faster ones, with Antonio Gibson's speed in the backfield, J.D. McKissic's speed in the backfield. The tight end position is the one position on the field, which is why I was so adamant I wanted a guy that could run. They got us Cole Turner. He's got a guy that has vertical ability, but again, not stretching the football field, vertically, but he's a taller guy, gives you a bigger catch radius and target to throw the football to. But on the field, from a speed standpoint, tight end is the only skill position offensively where we don't have game-changing speed. But obviously, Terry McLaurin is a 4.3 guy. Curtis Samuel's a 4.3 guy. Jahan Dotson's a 4.4 guy. And De'Ami Brown's a 4.4 guy. So our first 4 receivers are all sub 4.5 guys, 2 of which are sub 4.4 guys. And then in the backfield, you got another 4.3, 2 4.3 guys in J.D. McKissic and Antonio Gibson. So we've got speed everywhere. Now it's just about utilizing it, getting these guys out in space and allowing them to be able to do damage. But that's the thing that we've always wanted in Washington, is a faster offense, one that can hurt you, quick strike ability. We've lacked that for so long. We have a chance to do it this year, but we're going to have to actually make plays, take advantage of opportunities, and get these playmakers out in space. Mike Hilton, thank you, Rich, was the name of that corner that I wanted last year in free agency from the Steelers, who went to the Bengals and had an excellent year. Those are the types of guys that you don't lose anything. That they could essentially be your Buffalo nickel because they're so aggressive in run support. They're physical. You can blitz them, but in the same breath, in the same vein, they can cover because they're corners. And that, I think that's what they're hoping Percy Butler is able to do for them, honestly speaking. All right, so I'll take a couple of hashtags and then we will get out of here since we had some super chats. Let's see. Did I skip one? Let me make sure. No. All right, we're going to get to maybe 2 or 3 of these hashtags. Gregory Lightbody says, I'm sick and tired of Curtis Samuel BS. We should sign another receiver. while we still can. Maybe T.Y. Hilton. I want nothing to do. First of all, he doesn't fit what Ron Rivera has done since he's gotten here, which is he's kept it relatively young. He's not looking to sign any old, decrepit wide receivers like T.Y. Hilton, who hasn't been able to stay healthy. T.Y. Hilton's like 31, 32 years old. He's broken down, beaten up. Nah. But to your point with Curtis Samuel, if you were on the fence, this makes you a little uneasy. But I talk about it on the show today. So you'll hear me elaborate on it there, but I don't think it's anything that you should be overly concerned with now, but it is something worth paying attention to. That's for sure. Absolutely. Rich says, welcome to my city, man. All this is stuff I see weekly. I don't doubt that. DC is a very eccentric place. I enjoyed it thoroughly, but I can tell you this, the driving is something I would never be able to get used to. It's just weird. The streets are weird. The way people drive, there's a lack of patience that I just don't have the tolerance for, because it's so easy to have an accident happen because the idiot behind you doesn't want to wait 2 seconds. As soon as the light turns green, if you don't take off immediately, they're honking at you. And I'm like, what if a car comes screaming through the light? And because I take off, I'm one of those people that I'm a delayed takeoff guy when the light turns green, just to make sure, because an ex-teammate of mine got killed in a car accident because as soon as the light turned green, they were minding their business. They didn't do anything wrong. Guy comes screaming that's drunk in the middle of the afternoon through a red light, kills him. So I'm a little bit more cautious. The light turns green. I'm going to make sure there's no idiot coming through the light late. And they're not even giving you a chance. Here in Virginia, you could be on your phone. The light turns green. You're not paying attention. They'll give you about 3 seconds to get off your phone and look up, see the light's green, and take off. Not in DC. If those wheels aren't turning the second that green light turns, you're getting a honk. And it's too much for these damn drivers in DC for me. It's just too crazy for me. But everything else, the people on the street, all the shit that we saw, that doesn't bother me one bit. Anyway, let's see. That might be the last hashtag. I don't really see any more hashtags. Black Owl B writes, get ready for Rodgers to give up that division, my boy. We'll see. You know what? I wouldn't be shocked if it happened. Like, I'm intrigued with the Packers this year and how they are able to circumvent not having a true number one wide receiver. But I just bet on Rodgers. It's almost like when you go to Vegas, you're like, man, I just bet on black. I just bet on Rodgers. I mean, man's won 2 straight MVPs. He doesn't seem to be slowing down. He usually makes the best out of a situation. We'll see what happens, man. That's still a Packers team that I think is still head and shoulders above the rest of that division, but we'll see. Big Money Sonny writes, hand the division to the Lions in golf, GOAT golf. We taking it. GOAT golf. Get out of here. GOAT golf. Let's see. Anyway, okay, I think that's the last hashtag that I see. I don't see any really more hashtags. So we will go ahead and transition to the final segment of the show. And that's garbage time. My guy LP says, we're beating you week 2, Lou. I mean, if you're a Lions fan, you should believe that. I think we're beating you. You should think you're beating us. That's the beauty of 2 teams that are perceived to be garbage playing each other. That's what that should be. You shouldn't look at us as a team that you can't beat. We damn sure don't look at you as a team we can't beat. So I expect Lions fans to be counting. I've told the fan base this numerous times. Jacksonville Jaguars fans are counting week 1 against Washington as a win, and Lions fans are counting week 2 against Washington as a win. And they should. Okay, they should. Until we prove them wrong and we prove otherwise, they should be counting that as a victory. I don't blame you for feeling that way. I don't think you're right. I don't agree with you, but I agree with the fact that you think you're going to win that game, as you should think you're going to win that game. Anyway, I digress. Garbage time. So I want to start with the Deebo Samuel contract. We'll finish up. Let's start with Kyler Murray. That happened late last week. I never really got a chance to talk about it. So the Kyler Murray situation is hysterical to me because it was handled poorly by everyone involved. First, Kyler Murray made it publicly known that he doesn't watch film. Like, I've got an innate ability to just go out and kind of feel things out and let my play kind of, do the talking for me. And I just kind of, go by what I see. Oh, okay. That's cool when you're in high school and maybe even to a lesser degree in college. You're now a professional. You want to be paid big dollars. You have to commit to your profession and your trade. And one of the things you have to do to separate yourself if you want to be an elite quarterback is you have to study. You have to watch film. You have to know what's coming before it comes. When the defense is on the field and they give you a look, oh, I've seen this on film numerous times. This is what they like to do out of this look. This is what we're going to get more likely than not. You can't say that, oh, I'm natural and I just go off of, feel. Yeah, that's why you're throwing the ball into double coverage and throwing picks, because you just feel things. I don't watch film. So he put himself in quite the quandary by saying that. And then I'm pretty sure the coaching staff kind of sensed that. They don't see him, watching film extra at the facility. I'm assuming this is why this was in the contract. He's probably not the first one at the facility at 6:30 in the morning, getting there and watching film with the quarterback's coach or the offensive coordinator, breaking things down. He's definitely not going home and doing that. And so that's why they felt like they needed to put that provision in there. So, okay, fine. You decide to put the provision in there. This is a dumb move on the part of the Arizona Cardinals to leak that information that's in the contract. How did you think that was going to benefit you, him, or anybody in that situation? It wasn't going to be beneficial. It's going to make everyone look at Kyler Murray in a certain light, and it's going to put him on the defensive. I already talked about how thin-skinned Kyler Murray is, how he's not a great leader because he's already a guy that seems to like to point the finger and blame at someone else other than himself. So what do you think he's going to do when you put this provision in the contract that makes him look like he's a loafer, like he's a guy that doesn't do his job to the best of his abilities and someone that you can't trust with the amount of money that you just gave him, that you're forcing him to watch a X amount of, film per game week? I mean, come on. I mean, that was stupid. Like the Arizona Cardinals, that was a dumb move on their part. So now Kyler Murray has to defend himself. Now we got to have the whole black quarterback conversation. Patrick Mahomes has to chime in and say, you know what, being a black quarterback is already tough as is. And, situations like this make it even tougher. Like, these are the things that we don't want to have to talk about, but we have to talk about because you decided to be irresponsible. Now Kyler Murray has to come out and defend himself, and then he comes out and I told you, he's one of these guys that he's kind of weird. Kyler Murray he's eccentric. I'm gonna call him eccentric. That's a nice way of calling someone a weirdo. He's eccentric. He's, I think, socially awkward at times, and again, he's a very, very sensitive guy that likes to point. Rarely does he point the thumb. He's often pointing the finger, right? Rarely does he point the thumb. He's usually pointing the finger. So when this comes out, now he's tongue lashing the media for blowing this thing out of proportion. And, he's going on this tirade and all of the ripple effects of this thing coming out, the organization realizes we made a pretty damn big mistake here, and they take it out. Well, what's the point of that then, dude? Seriously, that was so dumb. And I don't think you got your point across. I don't think now Kyler Murray all of a sudden is going to start watching film on his own because of this. Like, that was dumb. Like, either you sit him down and you have a conversation with him and you say, hey, we're giving you this money with the expectation that you're going to be more of a leader and you're going to watch more film. You're going to show up earlier to the facility. You're going to be one of the guys that we lean on as a leader, man. And being a leader, some of that means watching more film. Either you have that conversation with him, or you put the provision in and you keep your damn mouth shut. Nobody knows why. We as fans, we should never know the inner workings of a contract other than the numbers that exist in the contract. That's it. How many years? How many $1 million total? And then how much of that is actually guaranteed? When's the first out in that contract after year 3? Like, that's all we should know. We shouldn't know that there's a provision in the contract that states he has to watch 4 hours of film per week. That's dumb. And it's stupid on your part to allow that to be leaked out. Anyway, that was a stupid situation that was only made worse by the way that it, kind of happened after the fact that news came out. It was a crazy situation. It's dumb. Anyway, I digress. Let's get to the DEEBO Samuel contract. It's crazy thinking about the DEEBO Samuel contract, right? Because here it is. We're in the offseason, and all of these receivers are either getting extended or they're getting traded. They're demanding their money. And so you had like 3 different pockets of receivers. The ones that wanted to be traded: Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams. I don't know if AJ Brown technically falls into that category, because I was adamant. If you remember, I said of all these receivers, and there were like 7 dudes this offseason that we knew were going to get paid, right? I was like, of those guys, and all of them, a lot of them were from that 2019 draft class, and then there were a few others like Devontae Adams. Some of those guys, you knew they were going to get paid too, right? Allen Robinson, we knew he was going to get his bread, probably somewhere else, and he ended up getting it with the LA Rams. But those 2019 receivers, DEEBO Samuel, Terry McLaurin, AJ Brown, DK Metcalf, we knew those guys were going to get broken off this offseason. And to see how it shaped out, I was like, okay, AJ Brown and Terry McLaurin are definitely not getting traded. Like, those were the 2 that I was like, they're definitely not getting traded. DEEBO Samuel, I think he wants to stay in San Francisco. He's a huge part of their offense. You won't find a better offensive mind in football than Kyle Shanahan. He's in the perfect spot. And then we find out he wants out. Oh, okay. Why? And initially we heard, oh, he wants to be closer to home. He's from South Carolina. He's out on the West Coast. And DEEBO was like, yo, I don't know where y'all got that shit from. That shit is not true. And so I was like, well, then what is it? And then we later find out he's like, I'm not a damn running back. Stop using me like I'm a damn running back. Like, I want to play this game until I'm 38, not until I'm 33, because you ran me into the ground like I'm some kind of damn running back. I'm not a running back. I'm a receiver. So he had an issue with the amount of carries he was getting. He's like, and I don't mind jet sweeps getting me on the outside. I'm talking about slamming me up in between the tackles like I'm some kind of 225-pound running back. Like, that's not who I am. I get it. So after, they had a come to Jesus moment, they sat down, they figured some shit out. It took a while, but they got to an agreement. He gets a deal. DK Metcalf, another dude. And I told you, we had this conversation on the podcast last week about DEEBO Samuel and DK Metcalf both showing up to camp because of the new CBA. They have to show up at camp. They can't, because if you don't, these fines they're brutal. And can you afford to sit out? These guys haven't made real money yet. So no, they can't. They're not in a position to sit out. But what they did do is they came to camp, but they didn't participate. That was their way of saying, hey, I'm not getting out there until you pay me. So these guys, I thought DK could get traded. I remember it was AJ Brown and Terry were the only ones that I thought were going to stay put. The rest of these dudes, I'm like, anything could happen. And the Seahawks had a chance to trade him. And they didn't. They had a chance. The Jets offered them number 10 overall, and the Seahawks turned it down. So, in essence, that's them saying, no, we're going to rebuild around DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and these guys, and we don't have a quarterback right now, but we'll eventually get one. And when we do get one, we already will have receivers for them to throw the football to, or that guy to throw the football to. So, I'll say, okay, well, we'll see what happens. DK got his money, got a huge fat 3-year extension. Tons of guaranteed money. The same can be said for DEEBO Samuel. Obviously, he gets a Massive 3-year extension. There's even an incentive in there to the life of his contract that if he hits a certain amount of rush yards, he gets another escalator that kicks in for his salary. So he becomes the highest paid receiver in terms of guaranteed money. Terry McLaurin had the highest before, and so DEEBO Samuel has since eclipsed that. 3-year, $73.5 million extension, 58 of it. And I did the math, and I looked at it, me and my wife, when my wife told me, that DEEBO got the new contract. I said, how much guaranteed? And she told me the number. I said, damn, that's about 80% of that deal. And I put the numbers in, and it was roughly 81% of the deal. I'm like, sheesh, that's some good money, man. I mean, that's a damn near fully guaranteed contract for DEEBO Samuel. And he deserves it. He's one of those dudes that just does everything for the San Francisco 49ers. Without him, their offense ceases to exist. He's one of the few guys. I liken him to Christian McCaffrey in Carolina. When Christian McCaffrey gets injured in Carolina, their offense goes to shit, to hell in a handbasket. They cease to exist offensively. They don't win very many football games. I'd imagine that's what the 49ers look like without DEEBO Samuel in their lineup. Remember, he was dealing with all types of injuries back in 2020. Now, they were all kinds of banged up. Nick Bosa got injured like week 2. They had so many injuries that year. But he was also dealing with a number of injuries, and their offense struggled because of it, and they only won. It was crazy. They won way more games than I thought they would, with the situation that they had. Quarterbacks, were banged up. They were playing with Nick Mullins and shit like that, but they still managed to win some football games, but they weren't in the contention to make the playoffs, and that really, I thought, stemmed from guys like DEEBO Samuel and Nick Bosa not being healthy. So he's a huge part of their offense, and what they like to do. Strikes fear in the opposing defense's heart. One of those guys you have to account for wherever he is on the field, because he can touch it in a myriad of ways. So he deserved every single cent that he got of that deal. And good for him. Good for DK Metcalf. Good for all these receivers. Now, I saw a tweet. 11 receivers got paid this offseason and are making $20 million or more after signing their contracts per year. It is amazing that this, almost like this wide receiver balloon that we saw this year, I don't know if it's going to burst or what, but man, I mean, a lot of receivers getting broken off, and rightfully so. In a lot of these instances, these guys deserve to get paid. The jury's still out on DK Metcalf for me. I'm not to the point where I used to doubt him when he was being talked about as a first-round pick in 2019. I was vehemently against him. He didn't run routes. He was a one-trick pony. He was big. He was fast, but I've seen big and fast before. It doesn't always equal good. But he went to the right team with Russell Wilson and an offense that I thought was tailor-made for his skill set. I'm interested to see what he does life after, Russell Wilson. All of this production that he had in Seattle, he, to me, should be able to still be productive no matter who's throwing the football, because that's what big and strong and fast should do, is no matter who's covering me, who's playing quarterback, just get me the rock, I'll do the rest. I'm anxious to see if that actually does apply to DK Metcalf. I'm interested to see what he does this year. Same thing with A.J. Brown, who I didn't think this would be possible, but he's playing with a lesser quarterback in Philadelphia and more weapons around him, right? So it should take a little bit of the pressure off of him. Not the same run game. You could argue, Philadelphia, number 1 rush offense. Derrick Henry was everything in Tennessee. That's not the case in Philadelphia. I still want to see what A.J. Brown's able to do with Jalen Hurts at quarterback. But that said, that's good money for DK. And that's great money for DEEBO Samuel. Both of them getting outstanding deals over the last week. And we'll finish up the show talking about Deshaun Watson. Now, Watson got his sentence, or his suspension. They finally made a ruling on his situation. The league pushed for 12 games. Deshaun Watson's camp said, hey, we'll compromise 6 to 8 games max. They wanted 0, okay? But they realized that's just not going to fly. So they said, hey, we'll offer up 6 to 8. The league wanted 12. The compromise was 6. The ruling was 6. And I told you guys, I thought 6 was the magic number. I was going with 4. That's been the number that I handed out, but I said 6 is the magic number. And every time I've done these schedules, I've said anybody that plays the Browns within the first 6 weeks, you're probably going to get a Deshaun Watson-less Cleveland Browns team. And so 6 sounds about right. It'll be interesting to see how they navigate those first 6 weeks. And then, conversely, how he comes off of that suspension and how he plays immediately after the suspension is really going to dictate how this Brown season goes, because if they start out 2-4, he comes off the suspension and he struggles that first game back, and then he gets hot. You're 2-5, and you could get hot, but you could win 6 of your next 7 and theoretically still only be 2 games over 500 and fighting for your playoff lives at 8-6. So, I mean, it's again, the Browns were willing to make this trade, and I'm pretty sure that they don't regret anything that they've done, because even if he would have gotten a year-long ban, and this is what I said the entire time, even if he were to get a year-long ban, as long as he's the Deshaun Watson that we last saw with the Houston Texans back in 2020. Right? As long as he was that same Deshaun Watson that we saw back in 2020, the last time he played football. Who cares about him getting, dude is 26 years old. Who cares about him getting suspended for a year? Once he comes back, he'll be going into his age 27 season. You'll have him, theoretically speaking, for the next decade. Who gives a shit? Okay. I mean, there's people out there that care, absolutely. But from a football perspective, you'll eat that. You'll eat these 6 games because you know what you're getting in Deshaun Watson if he's the guy that we saw previous to the suspension, and him not wanting to play football for the Texans last season. So, yeah, it's 6 games. The league just didn't have a leg to stand on there. They're lucky, to be honest, that they got 6 out of this thing. But the repetitive behavior, the things that he did over and over again, they were going to suspend him. They couldn't let him slide with nothing. So that's the verdict there. So the Browns will be without him for the first 6. Let me go look at the schedule for the Browns. We've already done that division. I'm anxious to take a look at this once again to see what that entails. Now that we know he's going to be out for the first 6, let's look at that Browns schedule real quick. So at Carolina week 1, home for the Jets week 2, at Pittsburgh on a Thursday, or home for Pittsburgh, on a Thursday night, at Atlanta week 4, home for the Chargers week 5, and home for New England week 6. And then his first game back will be at Baltimore. His second game back will be home against Cincinnati on a Monday night. So it's not going to be easy when he comes back, but I can tell you this, those first 6 games, especially the first 4, maybe not the last 2 of that 6-game stretch, but those first 4, they can win 3 out of 4 of those puppies. If they catch the Steelers slipping and tripping, they can win all 4 of them things. At Carolina, again, I don't want to keep disrespecting, even though I don't think the Panthers are going to be very good. I don't want to keep disrespecting them because they should be able to beat Jacoby Brissett. But, if that Browns defense steps up, they could. I mean, and I think it's going to be Sam Darnold. I've been saying this. I think it's still going to be Sam Darnold. They can beat them, right, with Jacoby Brissett. The Jets at the crib, I think the Jets are going to be improved. I think that's a winnable game for the Jets, but guess what? That's a winnable game for the Browns as well, even with Jacoby Brissett at under center. Home for Pittsburgh on a Thursday night. That's going to be tough, but that's a family business. That's a winnable football game. At Atlanta, I don't care who's that quarterback. That's a winnable football game. Now, home for the Chargers and home for the Patriots. That's home games. That's, it's good to be home, but I don't know. Those are tough. I think you'll be underdogs in both of those games. And then he comes back on the road at Baltimore week 7. That's probably a loss. And then the following week, home for Cincinnati, but I want to see what the Bengals are by the time we get to week 8. You know, if they're rolling by then, I think that's a loss too on a Monday night. So, and then look at what you have after the bye week: at Miami, at Buffalo, home for Tampa, you know, at Houston, winnable game, but then at Cincinnati, home for Baltimore. Like, yikes! I mean, that's tough. I said even with Deshaun Watson, I thought they would struggle this season. Knowing he was going to get suspended, I put them at 8-9, and I think that's ultimately where they end up, somewhere in that 9-8, 8-9 range. And knowing that he's got 6 games now, I think 8-9, I feel good about that, knowing he got the 6 piece instead of the 4. So that's going to be tough. Anyway, that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. I have a brand new member of the MOBB. G-Style, stand up. You are officially in the building as the newest member of the MOBB. So glad to have you on board. Mob, you know what to do. Show G-Style some love and welcome him with open arms. G-Style, welcome to the squad. And you're right in time. I'm about to start giving away tickets. Welcome aboard, my friend. So that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, on the 280th installment of the Louie T Network podcast. I thank you guys for joining me. Look forward to chopping it up with you guys next time. Trying to figure out if it'll be Wednesday, if it'll be, Thursday. I don't know. I would love to tell you that it's a set schedule, but it may be Wednesday. It's probably gonna be Wednesday. But either way, I will see you next time here on the Louie T Network podcast. You know what it is. Get off the bench, get in the game, and kick it with me, your man Louie T. Until next time, you guys take care. God bless. And of course, as always, good night. Louie T Network. Hold on. I got another super chat. I just saw that as I was getting out of here. G-Style, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Look at that pump fake. Some of y'all probably already took off and left. Happy to finally be a member. Keep doing your thing, homie. We really need to rack up on the NFC North this season if we're going to make it to my 11 wins prediction. I've said this already. In order to get to double-digit victories, 11, 12, which is, the mark that a lot of us are trying to have this team get to this year, you got to clean up on the NFC North and the AFC South. I said the magic number is 6 wins, 6-2 against those 2 divisions combined. Anything north of that, you're in great shape. Anything south of that, you're putting more pressure on yourself to win in the division games and games that are outside the division that are different from the rest of the division. So if you're Washington, you want to win in the division. That's imperative too. But if you go 5-3 against the AFC South and the NFC North combined, that means you need to go 5-1 in the division. You need to end up with 10 wins total between the division, a bare minimum of 10 wins between the division and those 2 divisions combined, AFC South and NFC North. If you can't do that, then you probably don't deserve to play bonus football. That's the, as a wise man would say, that's the truth of the matter. So anyway, I digress. Now, that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. Until next time, you guys have a good one. Louie T Network.